I think let's go ahead and get started if you're ready, Lynn.
Yep,
Um, Welcome everyone for attending our 98 conference and for attending this session. I'd like to introduce you to Lynn Gardner Lockett, the Executive Director of Genesis Community Development Corporation. All right, and here to talk about a very important topic. Thank you, Lynn, again and welcome. Thank you for providing this for us today.
you're welcome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Well, guys, if you had an opportunity to see the first keynote speaker, Kalechi, wasn't that awesome? It was like God sent because a lot of what she is saying is going to be part in this presentation. So I'm extremely happy. A little bit about me. I've worked for 22 years in mental health and retired 2 years ago. And now I'm working as an executive director of Genesis Community Development Corporation. And what we try to do is to work with youth and their families to give opportunities about education, jobs, careers, etc. Because what we found is that not having a future that you can see makes people hopeless and depressed, and therefore we are trying to overcome that. But as I was putting together a series of parent workshops that we provide free of service, I started to investigate more about suicide and especially in Black teens. And I've done conferences for NAMI Tri Valley, and I did not know that things had gotten so bad in the Black community in terms of suicide. So I'm hoping that this will help you and that we will be able together to kind of identify not only interventions, but also ways that individuals can help with someone to hold that space, so to speak. So, next slide. We're, we're going to talk about our research framework, do a little bit of understanding on historical trauma, some skill building, and multi level interventions. And so I'm excited to get your comments as well as part of this opportunity. So we'll get to the next slide. So when I was putting this together, I started, Google searching and researching studies and all that sort of stuff that help us to understand what's going on with teens, specifically Black teens and young adults. And I'm going to share some of that information with you. Next slide. So the first thing that I looked at is the Center for Disease Control's Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System survey that happens every year in schools. Every student has to do one out. Every student has to basically take this survey year after year after year. But it allows the center to identify what are some of the contributions toward causes of death and disability among young people. And they can do it over a year, over a 2 year, and now a 10 year. So we'll go to the next slide. So the data that I'm going to be sharing with you today is from the years 2013 to 2022. I want you to understand that over the last few years, especially with the pandemic, things have mental health issues have increased, but also violence in the schools. So from 21 to 23, kids were starting to experience more violence. From 2013 to 2023, the 10-year trend has been more violence, signs of poor mental health, and suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Now, the one good thing, or a couple of good things, is that in the same time period from 2013 to 2023, students are using less substances, illegal substances, and sexual activity has decreased. However, the protective sexual behaviors like using condoms and, taking birth control and that sort of stuff have not. So I don't think we're seeing the total challenge that we're going to be seeing in the future when mistakes are made. Next slide. So the other place that I got a lot of data is from a uh, research paper that was commissioned by the Congressional Black Caucus. Because back in 2019, this sort of phenomena started being not just tracked, but started getting out of control. And it was really something that was taking off. So in 2019, the Black Caucus actually had a conference, and they brought in speakers and individuals talking about Blacks having suicidal thoughts and what is going on in the community. Next slide. So we're going to basically kind of look at a number of things. I kind of like this visual because there's so many different things that contribute to what's going on with our families. Next. So according to the CDC, in a research paper that they gave in 2023, suicide in the Black community with Black children has become the second leading cause of death for kids 10 to 14, and the third leading cause of death for adolescents 15 to 19. And what we heard in the first session is that in the Black community, many people thought this was not an issue. We've always sort of stereotyped who commits suicide. I'll be perfectly honest. And the idea that all of a sudden Black kids were committing suicide was very foreign to people to understand. Um, but now there's no question that over a 14-year period, our kids ages 12 and under are more likely to die by suicide than their white peers. That stunned me and basically said, we got to get the word out. Even though the report came out in 2019, I don't know if there's anybody, and you can put it in the chat, who's ever heard of this report or has seen that there is a wealth of information about this change that has occurred. So that's why I'm trying to do this in different community settings, and so proud to be doing it for crisis services. Next. So just a couple of things to note. Again, suicide with Black youth has been increasing faster. 1 in 3 Black adults who need mental health services receive it, but the other 2 are flailing on their own. And unfortunately, there are so many serious psychological distresses that Black adults face more than white adults. Next. So let's look at some of the risk factors. And we heard earlier that racism and unemployment and access to care is really some of the fundamental things that increase, particularly in the Black community. If you are a Black person, you face driving while Black, walking while Black, you face systemic racism in employment and other areas. And the way that I liken it is it's almost like carrying one of those weighted blankets that now is the rage. But if you're carrying 20 weighted blankets, because every time you step out, you get another blanket put on you, then it becomes really depressing and overwhelming. And what we're trying to do is to expose this and also recognize that we can't fix it all at once, but these things do impact our communities. Next slide. Now, homelessness is another thing that impacts suicide in Black males. Um, One thing is that if you're homeless, you cannot go to a shelter if you have a male that's over the age, I believe, of 10. And so that exacerbates the problem. We know that incarceration rates are higher for Black people than they are for white people. It's three times, it's about 40% more incarceration for Blacks than for whites. We also know that now, if a Black male's mother is incarcerated, that has a tremendous impact on their um, thinking and their ability to manage all of the challenges. And they will be more likely to make a suicide plan compared to their female and white peers. Next. So let's look at, we're going to look at a couple of things. PTSD. We know that many times things are undiagnosed in not just our teens, but also in our adults. So if we could play this video clip. To watch because there's not any sound for a while.
PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. It is characterized by the failure to recover after experiencing a certain degree of trauma. Children and teens could have PTSD if they have lived through an event that could have caused them or someone else to be killed or badly hurt. Such events include sexual or physical abuse or other violent crimes. Other events that can cause PTSD are a war, a friend's suicide, or seeing violence in an area they live. There are teenagers all across this country and maybe even in this classroom dealing with PTSD each and every day. Lack of money, lack of food, violent communities, and facing homelessness can easily trigger PTSD. The symptoms of PTSD are agitation, irritability, hostility, hypervigilance, self-destructive behavior, or social isolation, fear, severe anxiety or mistrust, loss of interest or pleasure in activities, guilt or loneliness, insomnia or nightmares. The symptoms of the trauma usually begin within 3 months of the event, But when it comes to an ongoing and sometimes never-ending event such as poverty, there's no telling how long it can affect you. Not only is PTSD high in African Americans, but a PTSD diagnosis is more common in women because Black men are less likely to receive a diagnosis of PTSD. Black men are reluctant about going to a doctor for several reasons. They often don't want to be perceived as weak or weird. They're also afraid of being misdiagnosed. There just isn't a lot of support for Black men who have PTSD.
No one's going to be harmed. Yes.
Psychologists and therapists have found multiple ways for their patients to receive therapy and relieve stress. Sometimes the patient doesn't even realize it. If you are feeling the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, don't be afraid to ask for help. Speak to your parents, school guidance counselor, nurse, administrator, or call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline immediately. You are not alone.
All right. So let's go on to the next. I just want to remind you, in that video, you saw things like poverty. He didn't have shoes to wear, not really good shoes. He opened the refrigerator, it was empty. There were lots of other things that happened to this particular young man. But we have to do what we can do. All right, so now we're going to understand a little bit about historical trauma. Our next slide. This is I'm not sure how many of you know about ACEs. It's an Adverse Childhood Experiences survey. It was put together by the Center for Disease Controls and also Kaiser Permanente. What Kaiser was trying to figure out is if people experience these types of challenges, how is that going to affect their long-term physical health? And so they worked with the CDC to come up with 3 different types of ACEs, but 10 total questions to access and understand if these things have happened with a kid and a young adult. So abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual, neglect, whether it's physical and emotional, and then household dysfunction or household challenges, mental illness, abuse towards a parent or domestic violence, substance use, the incarcerated relative, and finally divorce. So all of these things impact us internally, and we're not even aware that it happened sometimes. You know, when they tell you to speak to your baby in utero, and people are all excited about that and telling, singing stories and all that kind of stuff. Well, these things happened to us, and people don't even remember it, but it still stays in our DNA. Next slide. So I was lucky a few years ago to hear Dr. Joy DeGruy, and she talks about a syndrome that she did in her PhD thesis, post-traumatic slave syndrome, and she's going to share how it's different than PTSD, but more importantly, I think you'll get a lot out of every time I've played this clip. People have said, "Oh my God, I had no idea my parent did this, and this was the reason why." So let's play the clip.
is an explanatory theory that really looks at multi-generational trauma. One of the things that's difficult for people is their first response is, oh my God, that happened so long ago. We're talking about people being captured, shipped, sold, beaten, raped, experimented on, and then you have to ask the question, did the trauma continue? Yes, so 300 years of trauma, no help, freed. No help, more trauma. If it's a sustained trauma, then the impact of that is also sustained. When we look at multi-generational trauma, we're looking at people who are maybe victims of natural disasters and their families and their children and generations of folks who have experienced war. And we know that there are residual mental, emotional, traumatic impact. And what I did was I started to look at the African-American experience, starting with slavery, as a real clear, long enduring trauma. So I started to see that there were clear connections between that survival behavior and contemporary living in African American experience. I started to see common behaviors that I took for granted as, well, cultural. There's adaptive behaviors, survival behaviors. Well, what are they? Let's just say 2019, you have a black mother and a white mother. The sons go to school together. They find themselves at a meeting. The black mother leans over to the white mother and says, I just wanted to mention to you that I noticed that your son is really doing quite well. And the white mother's response is, oh, thank you. She begins to go on and on about he won the science fair, his uncle's an astronaut. She's just oozing. She realizes the black mother's son is actually excelling her son. And she says, well, wait a minute. Your son's the one that's really coming along. And the black mother responds, oh my God, he's a handful, but oh, he just works my nerves. Now, when I'm working with African American people, it doesn't matter what the audience is. It doesn't matter what class. If I were to ask, is she very proud while she's saying those denigrating things? And everybody laughs and goes, of course, there's a secret. Because everybody black knows that even though the black mother is going, oh my God, she's really proud. So now let's roll that scene back 300 years. And let's say this black mother is working in the fields and a white slave owner comes through and says, wow, that boy is really coming along. What is she gonna say? No, he's not. He's stupid, he's shiftless, he can't work, because I don't want you to sell him. So I denigrate them to protect them. That is called appropriate adaptation when living in a hostile environment. The little white boy, say Timmy, you know, he feels really comfortable and happy about what his mom just said about him. And Trey looks at his mom and wonders, why can't you be proud of me? Because he doesn't understand the secret yet. And by the time he learns the secret, he will have already been injured by it. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. PTSD is a disorder that occurs as a result of a single trauma. You don't even have to be there to actually get a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. You could just hear about something horrific happening to someone you love. So you have people who have experienced it firsthand, people who have witnessed it in their environment, right? People who are continuing to be oppressed. That exacerbates any possibility of healing. So it's not post-traumatic stress disorder, because then it becomes part of what we call your socialization process. So you begin to normalize a way of living and being, everything from what we eat to what we believe it means to be a friend. You know, all of these things are colored by history. And if you don't understand it, you're going to fold in things that you've just assumed are normal. But post-traumatic stress disorder, you know, exaggerated startle response, outbursts of anger, feeling of foreshortened future. There was a point where there were, you know, African-American children in different urban settings that didn't expect to live to be adults because they saw so much death, that they started planning their funerals like at 13, 12, as young as 10. When you start looking at the simple biology, you start looking at the impact of stress on health. And while we look at general stress, you know, we know finances, you have illnesses, all these different things. How about being black? How does factoring in being black in America impact your stress level and therefore your body's ability to operate its own immune system? Because we know it compromises the immune system. Once you understand it, then you can deal with it. Because you see, it's habitual. You're socialized. It becomes part of your being. So one of the ways you begin to address that multi-generational trauma is to work with the people it directly impacts, to hear from them. And when you give the people the information, they can use it. I think the first order of business is beginning to have a conversation. And the other is to educate the larger society. You have to stop the assault. So this is not purely a clinical thing. This requires social justice and change. That's where part of the healing is. It's not in a clinical setting or in a pill. It's in fairness and justice and safety and equity. We got to work with some of those clinical things, some of those issues of panic and anxiety. And we also have to deal with the fact that you have a system that is set up to oppress you and to continue to injure you. Both those things have to be dealt with. And they cannot singularly by themselves affect a change. They have to be done collectively.
Right. So does anybody have any comments on that one? You can put it in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I get through all of this stuff. Okay, we'll slip to the next slide.
Post-traumatic.
Nope. There we go. So now we're going to talk about healing the present. That was just a slide to sort of get our mindset in. Next slide. So one of the things that happens, especially in areas where people have suffered stress and racism, is that there is a larger propensity to use substances to mask the pain that individuals are feeling so that they don't have to go to a doctor or a therapist, because I'm not crazy. I just want to be at peace. I want my mind to calm down, all that sort of stuff. But they don't understand that that also starts a, shall we say, a hopeless cycle, because now you have a comorbid disorder. You're maybe addicted to marijuana, and then you need more, and then it gets into drugs and alcohol, and then you're still not dealing with the depression and the anxiety. You're just trying to mask it. So one of the things that clinicians can do is to help people understand what it is that they are using to overcome the pain that they are feeling and don't want to share. Okay, so that would be a first one. So people have to do their own self assessment to determine, why am I doing what I'm doing? And then they can move into more of a treatment modality. Next slide. So we know that Black parents, just like white parents and any other set of parents, want their children to be successful in life. But what has happened is there's been some research by Harvard Center of the Developing Child that says you can't just focus on grades and extracurricular activities. You need to focus in on some skills that help children or people in general be able to navigate inevitable challenges. And we know that life happens and things come at us at different points in time, and we need to be focusing on some of the executive function skills on our next slide that will help our kids lead a happier and better life. Next slide. So those core important skills, the ones that I want to focus in on, are really being able to make a plan, to be able to carry out some goals and plans, self-control, how we respond and not just let our emotions get the best of us, and then flexibility. How do we adapt and help our kids learn to adapt to challenging and changing situations? I've worked with transitional age youth, 18 to 24, and they are suffering right now from a lack of, or they're overwhelmed because they feel that they don't know what direction to go. They're not sure how to handle things after they get out of their parents' home or after they get out of foster care. And so working with them in terms of teaching self-control and flexibility is going to be a very important part of the solution. Next. So building the future. Cute little kids, right? Just adorable. This nice young man is just as cute as he can be. This young lady is cute. What happens is for Black children, as they age, they become more of a threat to society or in the school rooms because they ask questions or they, may not listen, or then there's a situation where they go to the principal's office because they're difficult to manage in the classroom. What our teachers need to start doing is to investigate and to integrate that child more into classroom activities. Wouldn't it be great if little Johnny there, who's very curious right now, and when he gets to be around 10 or 11 and he's asking questions or he's talking to people, uh, rather than the teacher send him, get into a conflict with him and send him to the office, which then leads to possible suspensions and expulsions because he doesn't feel it's fair. I was just trying to get some information, or I was just asking you a question, and now you got upset with me. Um, so those are some examples. And then that goes to the school to prison pipeline, but we'll deal with that a little later. Sorry, next slide. So we talked about self-sabotaging. Social media um, is probably one of the worst things that has happened to our world, to be perfectly honest. It has some good things, but it has a lot of garbage out there. It has a lot of painful racism that our kids are exposed to 24/7. Now that people don't have to use their full name and can use some alias, they can spew all kind of crap out to our children. And unfortunately, many parents, it doesn't matter what the race, but uh, have used social media as a babysitter, where it used to be television in my day. Now it's social media. Yeah, you can stay on your phone as long as you're not bothering me. I'm happy. And then some of the parents have also gotten addicted to social media. So um, it's a time sink and it takes you down the rabbit hole, which we are seeing by some of the stuff in politics today. But I think it's important. This is going to be challenging because to get our kids back, we need to start to work with them closer, and that's going to take more time from the parent side of the house. You can't just say, oh, get off your device, and then there's nothing that they can do. We ought to get back to some of the things like, having family nights, having game nights, having activities that we all do together. Even if you can't afford a game, you can make up a game. A good game that I always do is let's put everybody's questions in things that they would like to do, put them in a jar. And then once a week, we pick from the jar and then we do that. Now, I'm not saying we're picking from the jar to go to Disneyland. What I'm saying is that we pick from the jar to interact with each other more and to have quiet time together and fun. Next slide. So here's some interventions for individuals. I'm not going to cover all of these, but I think telling people that you're depressed and feeling suicidal is probably the biggest barrier that we have to help our children, youth, and adults get over. If you don't ask for help, no one's in this day and age, no one's going to try to provide it. So using hotlines on the internet to maybe talk, If they're in school, there's always the counseling office. Now, here's the thing about the counseling office. If they don't feel that it's going to label them as someone in need, then kids are more likely to use the counseling office at a school site. But when you get to college and other places, you can just go ahead and do that. Next slide. I think I'm not gonna. Interventions for families and friends. I think the biggest ones are to observe and listen to your friends closely. I had a situation where there was a young lady that I was working with, and she eventually disclosed after I asked the question multiple times that yes, she was suicidal. And we talked about ways and alternatives and putting together a plan, that sort of stuff. But then it was, how do you reach out to others in your sphere? And she said many of the youth that she dealt with were talked about suicide as an option. Let's put it that way. They didn't hold it back. They were actually sharing some information and those sorts of things. So, but I believe we also need to reduce and eliminate negative self talk. And that's going to take a bit because the way that I tell the kids is we all have negative things that happened in our lives, and it's like a tape that plays in the back of your head and you keep playing that tape. So what you have to do is to turn off the tape and substitute it with other things, such as, are you good? What are you good at? What are the things that make you happy? How can you practice those? And then tell yourself, you know, it's okay. I'm actually a good person. I would have them make up, what do you call it? Boards that talked about what their strengths were. And then I would have them have a copy of the board at school in their binder that they could open up and look and review. And then I would also have them have it posted in their bedroom and in the bathroom. So when they go, they'd have three places to look at it and reaffirm and practice positive self affirmations. Um, it was interesting in the movie The Help, remember, when the main character was helping the little girl who was being neglected by her mom. She told her, you are smart, you are kind, you are important. Remember that scene? And those are things that you could, in fact, integrate into helping your friends and helping children. Next slide. So on the cultural side, it's my philosophy, because it is a continuum, that all families are dysfunctional. It's just a matter of which degree. So if we let them know that it's nothing wrong with having dysfunction, then that also alleviates some of the stress of not seeking help. You can tell them, okay, so it looks like you guys have a little bit. Looks like you're starting to go on the side where you're going to need more support. And as we all know, whoever is the person that usually is the quote unquote identified patient, because the group has said so, because they're either seeking to make changes or want to make a difference, don't silence them and isolate them. We've got to start telling our families, you don't silence the person who is observing the problem, and it's going to help support all of you. Okay, next one. So this was a thing I found on the CDC website. I liked it because it sort of encapsulates all the different kinds of things. So when we talk about poverty and economic support, You got to strengthen that. When we talk about the environments, we've got areas where there's food deserts. We've got areas where people don't have clean drinking water, and you need to address those issues. And then improving suicide care and mental health services. And then promoting, I believe, the connections, like we heard in the first session, personal engagements. Our church is actually has a intergenerational program that we have started for 3 years now. And what they do is they map young people with seniors and including young adults with seniors. And we talk about issues. We do fun things together. We actually start building relationships, because if most of you know that it's very difficult with families separated through different areas of the country. Where's the grandmother? Where's the big mama? Not around. So you have to make a difference in that. And then teaching those coping and problem solving skills like we've talked about earlier. Next. So I'm going to look at some resources. Next. So how do you find help? There's a number of groups and websites with directories. There's Therapy for Black Men, Therapy for Black Girls, the Black Mental Health Alliance. We'll click on next. There's a National Directory of Black Psychiatrists in America. And then there's the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network that's available. I will have a spreadsheet that I'm putting some of these together and some of the articles that I've read with their links. And I'll send that to Mercedes to add to the information that you can use. I think that will be very helpful. Next. Lastly, I want to end with the fact that in all reality, there are a large number of African Americans that have mental health issues. And the more that we bring that out and talk about it, the better off we are. So let's say up in the top right-hand corner, there's our lovely Simone Biles, who we all loved during the Olympics. And if we recall, back in the Japan Olympics, she basically said, I'm going to take care of my mental health. I've got the twisties. I don't know which side is up or down. So I'm going to take care of me. And she left early. And then this year in Paris, she got all kinds of Olympic gold medals. But she has suffered from anxiety and depression. And many of it was caused, if you'll recall, by the fact that she was abused by the team doctor, the U.S. Olympic girls gymnastics team doctor. So that's an example. Michelle Obama. Michelle has openly stated that she has low-grade depression. And when people were saying, oh, she should run, I'm thinking like, no, she shouldn't run. She needs to take care of her own mental health and not be exposed. And if you will recall, she's had 8 years of political life where if you saw some of the stuff that was on the internet about them, it would make you throw up. So I think them giving 8 years of their life to help America was enough. And I'm so glad that she's taking good care of herself. Oprah Winfrey says she suffers from depression and body image. Let's see, I've got a few others to give you some ideas on. Janet Jackson, she suffered depression and feelings of inadequacy. There's Jennifer Lewis, she was the Black mother on Blackish, and she suffers from bipolar disorder. What I'm trying to say is that we need to normalize this. We need to not only, there are some videos out there where Black people, famous people, are talking about their mental health disorders. And so those would be useful to use with clients so that they know that, oh, okay, well, if they did it, I can get over this. And the queen bee was stated that she had generational trauma and she was body shamed. Now, that's one heck of a lady's body, but she still suffers from it. And we just have to get that information out. I think the next slide. So this was another study. It's done by a research nonprofit organization that tries to unravel the stigma for teens. And the thing I liked about it is that they had this picture about stigma and other barriers. And the cool thing is that the feelings of shame and embarrassment and feelings of being seen as mentally ill, we have to make sure that we change those. Um, I think that churches have a role because African Americans are very faith based. Not all, but many are, and they spend a lot of time in church. So pastors need to start having discussions about mental illness, and there are some programs that actually do go out and educate churches about mental health. And my church, basically just finished a 2-part series. Part of it was going over this first piece, and then I had two therapists in. One is a PhD in psychology, and the other one is a licensed marriage and family therapist. They came on Wednesday of this week, and they provided insight to our families about what's it look like, what are some things that parents can do differently so that they don't exacerbate what the kid's already going through and that sort of stuff. Next slide. This was another part that I liked for them because it basically says what the kids thought made them uncomfortable talking to adults and talking to friends. And as effectively, again, they don't want anyone to find out that they're struggling. If you remember the video, when the kid tried to type in, he wanted to get help, and then he gave up and tossed his paper aside and just left. Next slide. Coming to the end. All right. So one of the quotes that I love the most is from Frederick Douglass, and it's about building strong children versus repairing broken men. And so, what Genesis does is try to help build strong children and try to get the parents to understand that there are ways that they can make changes in how their household is run. We can't solve all the problems, but the words that we use make a difference. And even a hug or a kiss can make a big difference when you haven't received it. I use myself as an example. My mom was raised by her grandparents, and she was a great single parent, but she did not do the emotional side of things. So to get a hug from her was not even, I can remember on 10 fingers out of my entire lifetime when that happened. But I made a conscious decision that I was going to change that dynamic and that the generational curse was going to be broken with me. And so I hug and kiss my daughter every day, multiple times a day, and we speak and talk and have a great relationship. So it is possible to do these things. We just got to let our folks know, and people who are working with Black children to know that even if you I guess part of it is that Black people are huggers most of the time. And so we're much more affectionate, outgoing than people who are worried about, am I going to get sued or is somebody going to think that I'm trying to be with this kid sexually? And you might find, if you can do it and get permission and do it in public so nobody thinks that you're doing something behind the closed door, that you will make a big difference in that child's life. I've had kids that lost their parents and they needed a hug. So I wasn't going to just sit there and not give them a hug. Okay, that's my spiel. Let's go. I think the next one is just my info. So if you're interested in further discussion, I would love to chat with you. And if you would want a presentation, or if you want to know what presentations we have, I'd really love to be able to talk to you about that. We have a series of career opportunity workshops, college readiness workshops, and then the parent, guardian, um, transitional age youth workshops that talk about life skills and mental health. So we are more than happy to come to your organization or do something over Zoom for your staff or for your families. And it's free of charge to you. You just got to call me and we can set something up. So that's it, Mercedes.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm gonna stop sharing here, and then
Do you have any questions?
yeah, thank you so much.
Are we posting our questions in chat or
You can
just
ask,
asking?
you can ask them, and
I thought that presentation was amazing. It was very, very valuable and I took a lot away from it. And it would mean the world to me to actually get a copy of the presentation, the slides, just because there's so much good content in there.
okay.
Yeah, the recording of the webinar of this session and the slides will be sent out to all of the registered participants, and I believe that we're going to be and we usually, for these conferences, we usually create kind of like a page on our website where we post all of them all in one page, and they'll also be sent to registered participants. And Lynn, I'll definitely follow up with you with regards to getting the links to the resources that you provided, and possibly also like the videos and the studies as well. And I can
Okay.
all of those to bin to post up and send out if
Okay.
that works with you.
No problem.
Thank you. And we've got a couple of hands. Adrian.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think I thought I heard you say, and correct me if I heard you heard you right, that males over the age of 10 are not able to stay at homeless shelters. Did I hear you correctly?
That's my understanding. And I've
Ah,
checked with a couple of places and they're like, and I know why, because let's just say a male was sexually abused and he's older and now he's at a shelter where there are younger children. He may do the same thing. So
mhm.
I think, again, it's one of those things where, from a um, liability perspective, shelters are like, no, we just can't handle this. It's not right. And that's why you see so many people sleeping in cars, or families, because the moms have to choose between, do I leave my child without the ability, if I can't stay at a relative's home, then we all have to be together as
Yeah.
opposed to leaving them outside. It's just horrible.
Yeah, what a terrible shame.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Jaleel?
Len,
Mhm.
Len, can you hear me? Len, can you
Um,
hear me? This
I
is
can hear you.
Joanne.
Okay.
Yes, my question is, do we find the same situation where a child may or may not have been abused? He's approaching 10 or he is 10 in other ethnic groups? Or is this specifically for Black children,
No,
Black
no, no.
males?
This is across the board in homeless shelters. They won't take them, irregardless of race.
Okay,
They've done it.
thank you for that clarification because it didn't come across that way. It
Okay.
sounded like it was exclusively something that African American young children were experiencing, and I wanted to make sure my takeaway was accurate. So
Right.
thank you for that.
Thank you for clarifying it. Yeah. Jaleel,
Hi, Miss Gardner.
how
It's
are you?
Chili. Good. How you do?
Fine.
Good. I truly enjoyed your presentation. Um, how can I get more insight about the video reel you showed with the two parents talking? And it just struck a chord with me about um, Dr. Joy's presentation on the purpose for a parent to denigrate their child to protect them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just want to get more understanding about that. What is the best practice? And I mean, I don't want to I think that parents' best practice work for them or when parents denigrate their children, they do it because this is the way that they show love to their child. Whereas another parent might say, that's not love. You're supposed to esteem your child and show affection. But
Right.
I just want to be challenged to figure out how to respond best to each practice and figure out
Mm,
what's best for me.
gotcha. If you go on and Google search Dr. DeGru on YouTube, there's probably uh 400 hours of her stuff. She does presentations and you can do the 2 hour version, the 4 hour version, or you can get these little small snippets. And so that's why I brought the small snippet. Obviously, I can't do a 4 hour version. But what I will say is that many of the people who have watched this understand now why their parent acted certain ways. And if you want to use it to show people to say, hey, these are things, did that ever happen to you? Did you ever think that it was 300 years ago and now it's still carrying down? Um, and that's the key is that unfortunately, some of this trauma that she talks about is still being reinitiated every day, and especially in households where there's, I would say, one caregiver because they have so much else on their plate that they, you know, I'm throwing up my hands. By the time they turn 18, they're yours. I can't tell you how many times when I had kids come in and their parent would say, can you take them? I'm like, excuse me? Can you take them? I'm sick and tired of dealing with them. That's not a good way to start a counseling session because they're the parent is frustrated and has tried the best they could, but they weren't using um, the coping skills that the child needed, and they weren't showing the love and affection. So now you got an angry kid, you got an angry parent, everything. Then you come into a counseling office and the parent says, take my child, send them to juvenile hall. It's like, oh my God, no. I sometimes have to educate the parent that that will cost you money. Even if you could do it, you'd have to still pay for your child to be in juvenile hall. And then they're like, what? That stops them a little bit. But yeah, if I can talk to you offline and get you some some of the better clips because she's got some great ones. I've been trying to figure out how to get a couple of organizations to pay for her to come back out and have a presentation to a larger audience, including parents.
All right, thank you so much, Lynn. And again, thank you for your presentation. Thank you to everyone that was able to attend and for your questions. We're gonna go ahead and we have our next session in about a little under 10 minutes. So please take advantage of the break that you will have. And again, thank you so much, Lynn.
You're so welcome. Please fill out the eval.
Yes. Let me make sure that if you didn't get the eval link on chat, because chat was moving really quickly, which is good. I'm gonna go ahead and put it in one more time, and if you all could grab it and fill it out, that would be awesome. Thanks again, folks.